All right, welcome back to my off-season series. This is Pennies in the Bank, episode number 3. So I know you guys are probably curious as far as the split I'm running, how much volume I'm doing, how I program volume, the frequency, the intensity, maybe how I progress on my lifts. And I promise I'm going to get to those things in future episodes. But I think what takes precedence over that, or at least is a little bit higher up on the priority list, and that is the actual exercise form, like how I'm moving the load from point A to point B. And I know exercise form can be pretty subjective. One bodybuilder might be doing a movement a certain way. Another bodybuilder is doing the same movement, but it looks a little bit different. Some will say, hey, this way's better than that way. But really, the way I kind of look at exercise form is that for me anyways, I want to make things as precise and consistent as possible. So the last rep of my last set, I want it to look like the very first rep of my first set. Just flawless movement pattern, in control, and the load isn't controlling me, but rather I'm controlling the load throughout the entirety of all my reps and all my sets. So you can kind of say that I'm more of a perfectionist in comparison to maybe someone else who thinks it might be okay to deviate. For me anyways, I just want to make things, as flawless as possible. And I tend to look at other sports for some inspiration. Like if I look at, let's say, a Roger Federer, if he's serving in a fifth set tie break, he's not going to tell himself it's okay if I deviate with my form and the ball goes outside the lines a little bit. He's going to make sure that he's staying in control of himself. He's trying to serve with as much power and control as possible. And that's how I view my exercise form. Again, I want to make sure it's as flawless and consistent as possible. And I love to look at and watch Evander Holyfield fights because that guy is a tremendous warrior. Like, he's been in some serious brawls and taken some punches. He doesn't lose his cool. He stays calm. He stays collected. And he fires back with some very hard shots of his own. And those shots aren't wild. They're controlled and in line with those punches that he's throwing under fire, under pressure. So again, that's how I view, my form is like, from the first rep all the way to the last one, especially, when I'm, let's say, pushing closer to failure or at failure. And the way I kind of define failure is not being able to move a load any longer with the form that I want to do. Again, like last rep or two, I want it to look like, a hard Evander Holyfield punch. I'm getting that power and that control. So again, I think there's a lot to take from other sports outside of just, watching other bodybuilders. And I do believe it's, made me a far better bodybuilder by, again, looking outside the realm of bodybuilding in a sense. I remember back in 2010, coming off of my 2009 season, I won 2 pro cards in 2009, and I had a great season. I had probably my best physique up to that point, but it lacked in back development. And nowadays, like if we're lacking in a particular body part, oftentimes, our first thought is, hey, we need to do more for that body part. But I didn't improve my back from 2009 to 2011, my first pro season. Like, my back improved quite a bit, but it wasn't because I was doing more for my back. It was, taking a step back and realizing that my exercise form on back movements was less than ideal. And I think, like for many of us, we put ego ahead of things, and we let the ego kind of dictate our approach. So, up until 2009, for many, many years, it was always load before the form. And I was just serving for a fifth set tiebreak, but the ball kept going outside the lines because I was trying to serve too hard without the control. So basically, I knew I needed to clean up my back movement. So that just meant dropping load down and really focusing on improving my exercise form, my exercise technique. and did increase the load, then it was make that new load look exactly like the old load. So the form always was the priority. So I do think your technique does matter in maximizing, of course, like mind muscle connection, recruiting as much muscle as possible. And then, of course, rest and all that good stuff comes into play, and volume and all that. But again, the form, I think that was the main driver for my back improvement. So that same principle over into the other body parts and really focusing on trying to improve my chest. And I wouldn't say I've been adding more volume to my chest. I just reevaluated the exercise selection and also how I'm executing the movement. And that's what I'm banking on with this off season, is to improve my chest by just ensuring that my technique is on the money. And of course, every time I increase the load, we're going to make sure that that form does not deviate and we're on point. So again, I'm serving for the 5th set tie break, and I'm making sure the ball is going in the lines with a lot of power and of course control. So again, I think it's super important that we're on the money with these things. Now, some people might say, hey, when you're, grinding out closer to failure, it's okay if you deviate a little bit. And for me personally, what gives me confidence and peace of mind is being a perfectionist. And you want to feel super comfortable regardless of your approach. Like if you're in the gym, you're not super comfortable with your approach, you're not confident in it, then you're not going to be as willing to push yourself. Holding back on loads, maybe you're leaving far too many reps in reserve, and things like that, because you are leaving some gains on the table. So regardless of approach, whether again you're perfectionist or you're deviating a little bit, you just want to make sure that in your head you're super confident and you're super comfortable and you feel safe, because if that's the case, then you're going to be willing to get after it a little bit more in the weight room. For me personally, it's always form before the load. And again, whether it's the first rep or it's the very last grinder rep of my last set, like it's just that weight moving snail's pace, like it's moving so slow, but I'm not asking for momentum or I'm not asking leverage to help me move that weight. And again, that's just me being a perfectionist, and how I'm able to grind with the last rep or two where it's just moving so slow and inside everything's just on fire. I really try to control my emotions, because oftentimes when we're grinding like that, there's a lot of pain there, right? Everything just feels like it's on fire. You start to feel things shaking and trembling. But if you control your breathing, like if you don't let anxiety take over, and you start to focus more on that pain than you are like the actual movement, and that's what I try to do, is focus on the movement and relax in the fight, control my breathing, and stay composed. And it's pretty amazing just how much more I can get out of myself. On average, I can probably squeak out another 1 to 3 reps on my sets by having more control. So that's kind of what I think about, when I'm under fire, is like just really control my emotions, control my breathing, and stay, poised in the pocket. And that's one way I'm able to get a lot out of my physique. So yeah, I think, it's a skill in itself to stay in the pocket and grind in those grinder reps. But, that's one thing I would just say to you guys, like if you've never really experimented with that type of approach, you might surprise yourself. And again, it takes a little practice, and you'll be quite surprised how many more reps you can actually get out of yourself. So in a sense, becoming a little bit more efficient. Hopefully this was useful. Keep in mind that this is, my approach, how I perceive things. I would say my approach is a little of, hey, let me take a little bit of science, let me take a little bit of practicality, let me take a little bit of enjoyment, and let me take a little bit of safety, mold these things all into one, and to try to find the best approach for myself. And also, all this is also dependent upon the exercise that I'm actually performing. So some, I'm not going to take close to failure. I'm not going to try to extend the sets out, a squat, a deadlift, those type of exercises. That's more catered towards the isolation movements. But there's just a lot of context involved with my decision making and my approach. But anyways, I will touch on more of this stuff in future episodes. Any questions, any comments, feel free to throw those below, and I'll do my best to engage. And I hope you guys have a great week of training, and we'll talk in the next one.